There once was a wise woman who lived by herself near a small village. Rumor had it that she could always and accurately predict the weather, help sick children with special herbs, and even help neighbors resolve their fights and arguments. People came from all over to meet with her and seek her advice on matters both big and small. Her reputation was such that it was said she was never wrong. Not ever. Some of the village children didn't believe it was possible to always be right. Surely she could not know everything. So they decided to test her knowledge. First, they asked her to answer questions about the planets, animals, even the world. No matter how hard the questions were, she always answered correctly. The children were amazed at her knowledge, and most were ready to stop testing the wise woman. However, one boy, one boy was determined to prove that the old woman couldn't know everything. So he decided to hatch a plan. He told his friends to meet him at the woman's home the following afternoon so he could prove she was a fraud. All through the next day, he hunted for a bird, and finally, he caught a small songbird in a net. And holding it behind his back so no one could see what was in his hands, he walked triumphantly to the wise woman's home. Old woman, he called, come and show us how wise you are. The woman walked calmly to the door. May I help you? She simply asked. You say you know everything. Prove it. What am I holding behind my back? The young boy demanded. The old woman thought for a moment. She could make out the faint sounds of a bird's wings rustling, but she said, I do not say that I know everything, for that would be impossible. However, I do believe you're holding a bird in your hands. The boy was furious. How could the woman have possibly known that he had a bird? Thinking quickly, he came up with a new scheme. He would ask the woman whether the bird was alive or dead. If the woman replied alive, he would squeeze his hands and crush it to prove her wrong. But if she answered dead, he would pull the bird from it behind his back and allow it to fly away. Either way, he would prove his point, and the wise woman would be discredited. Very good, he called. It is a bird, but tell me, is the bird that I'm holding alive or dead? The wise woman paused for a long moment while the boy waited with anticipation for his opportunity to prove her wrong. And again, the wise woman spoke calmly. The answer, my friend, is in your hands. The answer is in your hands. The boy realized that the wise woman had once again spoken correctly and truthfully. The answer was indeed in his own hands. Feeling the bird frantically moving in his hands as he tried to escape, he suddenly felt ashamed. The answer was in his hands, and slowly and gently, he brought the delicate bird from behind his back, looked into the eyes, and felt ashamed. He apologized and let the bird go free. My friends, today I want to talk about the power of community. It's in our hands. But I want to start by thanking Sonia for that warm introduction. And again, I'm Dr. Kelly Brown, an associate professor at TAM-UCC, and I want to thank Dr. Edmondson and the committee for this invitation. It was an honor and honestly a surprise. I must also thank the president, Dr. Benedetti, and the entire team, including the board, who made this conference a reality. As they said, I know sometimes it can be difficult to pivot midstream, but when people put in the hard work to make the conference a reality, anything can happen. So many of you aren't just my community, you're my friends. This organization was one of my first scholarly homes I found as a young professional. It poured into me when I needed it most and became instrumental in shaping who I am today. So from my colleagues at Prairie View to Lamar and my current family at TAM-UCC, Each experience helped me be better and bridge the gap from K-12 to higher education. My academic community has been my lifeline. And then there's my self-made community, my husband Julian and my four daughters, Caitlin, Madison, Cameron, and Mackenzie, who keep me humble, grounded, and always learning. So like Sonia said, my research has historically focused on racial equity and community engaged reform. I find myself centering on one belief that true educational reform cannot happen behind closed doors or in silos. We must include the voices of those pushed to the margins and those whose experiences we too often ignore or overlook. So when I received the email about this lecture, I felt it was so appropriate, especially because, like many others, I found myself at a crossroads. And I'll be honest, I never heard of Walter Cocking. So if you're like me, allow me a moment to tell you his story. Because when history is in the danger of being erased and forgotten, his story is worth remembering. In 1941, Georgia erupted as it was in the middle of a political firestorm that will later be known as the Cocking Affair. The story may sound familiar as we continue. Walter Cocking was a respected dean at the University of Georgia, and he wasn't fired for incompetence, no. He was fired for his conscience. More specifically, believing in educational equity or racial equity. Cocking believed in expanding access to a quality education in a segregated system. Unfortunately, that put him at odds with Governor Eugene Talmadge, a segregationist who wielded politics like a weapon. He targeted Cocking for standing up for Black students' right to education and trying to expand that access. When the Board of Regents refused to fire him, Talmadge replaced them. All of them. The result, Cocking was gone. University President Caldwell, gone. The faculty was in protest, and SACS, yes, that same organization that we all know and love, revoked Georgia's accreditation entirely. But that was just the beginning. Within a year, the vice chancellor of the system was gone, and 10 additional educators had been purged. Libraries purged, administrators intimidated, teachers' morale was shattered, and the public trust was broken. Sound familiar? Today, we watch education and policy clash. Students and teachers suffer as they try to balance differing or competing agendas. Librarians and books are being pulled off the shelves, and school leaders are being targeted for embracing inclusion. All driven by fear masquerading as politics. But there is always a wise woman on the top of the hill. She lived alone. I don't know if you noticed that in the story, but she lived alone. And sometimes when life gets dark and the path is loud, it's easy to feel like the wise woman, isolated on her hill. Opposition's greatest weapon isn't a direct attack, it's isolation. It's those whispers in our ears telling us that we stand by ourselves and that our voices don't matter, that speaking up isn't worth the risk. But just because she was alone doesn't mean she was lonely. I actually can't help but wonder about her life. I imagine a full life bursting with experiences, knowledge, and connection, a house filled not with just books, but photographs of travels, faces of family and friends. Maybe she was a teacher, her wisdom shared with countless eager minds. Because wisdom isn't formed in a vacuum. No, it's forged in the fires of our shared human experience. In a community that seeks your guidance, respects your counsel, and holds you in awe, well, that's a community that ensures you are never truly alone. So, my friends, when you feel that pull to withdraw, know this: you are not alone. My own roots, though planted in Texas soil, reach deep into Arkansas. Every summer, that trip to my mother's childhood home was a drive I yearned for. San Antonio was a great place to grow up, but it was a world away from the quiet hum of crickets singing in the Arkansas night. Our street there wasn't just houses, it was a patchwork of family and folks that we simply called family. No one locked their doors, I would just walk right in. My mother would tell me about Sundays when she was growing up. You didn't just cook for your house, you cooked for the entire street. Why? Because no one had much, so everyone took care of everyone else. My mom would say her dad would tell her, Kat, go over to Aunt Fannie Mae's house and get us a pie. And she would race down the street and push open the screen door, and Aunt Fannie Mae would call out, Girl, what you want? Daddy sent me down here to get a pie. Why are you even telling me that? Go get you one of the pies and bring me back a plate. And on her counter was 10, maybe 15 pies fresh from the oven. And that was normal. It was natural. It was community. Sunday dinner was a communal feast where everyone brought what they had, so no one went without. It was people first, and it was community first. What they instinctively knew on that little street called Morningstar, with its unlocked doors and its shared pies, was that no matter what chaos swirled in this wider world, they could lean on each other. They could protect each other, even if it meant letting CW sleep in the shed to escape the rain, or pulling Miss Dunwitty in the throes of an epileptic episode out of the street to keep her safe, or the collective raising of children, where one misstep in public or in church meant that your parents heard about it long before you got home. In a community like that, even when you are alone in your thoughts, you are never truly alone. But I must admit, that feeling of being alone, of wanting to retreat, sometimes washes over me now. And I remember the words of Audre Lorde when she said, Your silence will not protect you. The wise woman on the hill understood this, and she answered every question, spoke truth to every challenger, and she never retreated into silence. She represents each of us because our community, our power, real power, lies with us. It lies in our collective voice and in our shared humanity. 2 years ago, on June 24th, my father passed away. My first teaching job had been in one of the same school districts where he was a principal. And when I shared the news on Facebook, an outpouring came, messages and stories from people whose paths he had crossed, many of whom I never knew he even worked with, and they were my colleagues also. Later that year in a conference, strangers still approached me, sharing their memories of him. He wasn't always surrounded by people, but his impact and his reach created a vast, unseen community of support. Then, just a year later, on July 5th, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. I couldn't be here last year because I was in the hospital with her. My first instinct was to isolate, to drop everything and just stop. But there were key people in my orbit who, even when I withdrew, made sure I still felt their presence. Madison spent Halloween, Thanksgiving, and her birthday all in the hospital. The staff at MD Anderson and the nurses who I can still visualize and recall, they're etched in my memory, they made sure she felt special. And outside those hospital walls, my friends took care of my children by taking them trick-or-treating. They cooked Thanksgiving dinner and brought it to the house for Julian and the girls. My daughter couldn't always have visitors, but even when we were alone in that hospital room, I felt undeniably lifted by the strength of our community. We are not meant to walk this path alone, The wise women on the hill, my Arkansas family, the countless people touched by my father, and the unwavering support during my daughter's illness, they all whisper the same truth. We are stronger together. Our community is our shield, our voice, our solace. And in the moments when we feel most isolated, it's the very force that reminds us we are and always will be connected. History whispers that same truth to us. On August 28, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood before 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial. The world sees one man, one voice, and one dream being born. But if you pull back the curtain, you'll find something beautiful. That iconic moment, that speech that still gives us chills today, was community in action. Right there behind the podium stood Mahalia Jackson. Y'all know Mahalia as our gospel queen, but to King, she was his musical partner, his trusted voice, and a friend for years. She knew his heart like she knew her own hymns. So that morning, when King asked her to sing "I've Been Buked and I've Been Scorned" to open a speech, she understood the assignment. She felt the weight of the moment. But here's what gets me. When she sensed his prepared remarks weren't reaching deep enough, that they weren't touching the place where real change lives, she didn't hesitate to use her voice. From right behind the podium in the middle of the speech, she called out loud enough for everyone to hear, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And that's when magic happened. Dr. King set aside those carefully written notes and let his heart speak. And the next words were, "And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream." Those words still echo in our souls today, and they came from community. They came from Mahalia knowing when to speak up. But even Mahalia's courage was held up by another invisible giant, Bayard Rustin. While King stood in the spotlight, Rustin spent 8 weeks in the shadows. 8 weeks with no cell phone, no email, no faxes, just pure determination, working the phones probably until his fingers cramped, typing letters till his eyes burned, and thriving in beautiful chaos, organizing a movement. And here's what breaks my heart and fills it at the same time. Rustin faced his own discrimination, not just for being Black, but for being gay. Yet, he poured everything he had into fighting for others. Freedom. The march existed because Rustin willed it into existence. That's what community looks like. Not everyone can be up front, but the person up front can never be alone. Success doesn't come from solo acts. It comes from people working together, each bringing their gifts, even while carrying their own burdens, because the cause is bigger than any one of us. King's dream became America's dream because a whole community of voices, seen and unseen, made it possible. So what does community mean to you? Let me paint you another picture that comes from nature. Honeybees don't just coexist, they communicate danger through dance. So one bee's warning becomes the hive's salvation. Penguins huddle against Antarctic winds, rotating from outside to inside so no one freezes alone. Penguins and honeybees, they share the burden of survival. But I think my favorite example comes from a speech that Taraji P. Henson made when she was talking about the Babemba tribe of South Africa. When someone acts unjustly, they don't exile or punish, they circle. The entire village stops working and everyone gathers around that person who made an error, and then one by one they speak, not in condemnation, but affirmation. It's restoration. Every good deed, every act of kindness, every moment of strength that person has shown is recounted for love and precision for days. And at the end, a celebration, a welcome home. This is my definition of community, choosing to see the value in each other's cracks. The Japanese have a practice called kintsugi, and that's repairing broken pottery that has been destroyed. But instead of fixing it or repairing it with glue, they transform it with gold. And it makes that damage into something even more beautiful and more valuable than it was before. America is our kintsugi project. We break, like when we bombed Black Wall Street in the 20s, and then limit home ownership through redlining in the 30s. We gave women the right to vote in 1920 and then spent 45 years denying it to Black women. Hiram Revels walked into the Senate in 1870, but children couldn't walk safely into the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963. But then we mend. There were 2,000 African Americans who held office during Reconstruction. Mary McLeod Bethune built the National Council of Negro Women and helped usher in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That represented a century of Black women and men's tireless work, and Shirley Chisholm became the first Black U.S. representative. My friends, the cracks in our pottery tell our story. The gold that repairs us, it's mixed in our communities, our schools, and our homes. Wherever we choose to see each other not as perfect, but as us, imperfect people wrestling with who we are and who we want to be. This is justice, not perfection, but the endless work of just us trying to do right. So, unlike the boy who tried to trap the wise woman, the rest of the village sought her wisdom. They recognized power when they saw it. And Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." I hope the wise woman wasn't just an answer giver, but a storyteller herself. I choose to believe so because, again, wisdom isn't always about answers, but about the stories we share, the experiences we weave into the fabric of our collective understanding. Stories are meant to change the world. That's why fables echo through generations and across cultures. They carry truths that are to transform us. When we hold our wisdom inside, when we stay quiet about what we know, when we keep our experiences buried, that's when we suffer. That's when our communities suffer. But when we speak, when we share our truth, that's when transformation begins, right there in our hands. So as I close, I want to share one more story that keeps coming back to me. A daughter came to her mother, worn down by life's struggles. "I'm tired," she said. "I'm tired of fighting. As soon as I solve one problem, here comes another." Her mother, a chef who understood that the kitchen can sometimes hold life's greatest lessons, took her daughter by the hand and filled 3 pots with water. She set them on high heat and waited. Once they were boiling, good and strong, she dropped potatoes in one pot, eggs in the second, and coffee beans in the third. Then she did what mothers do best. She let the lesson simmer. 20 minutes, not a word, just waiting, while her daughter fidgeted and wondered what in the world was happening. Finally, she turned off the burners, put the potatoes in one bowl, eggs in another, and then coffee in the cup. "Daughter, what do you see?" "Potatoes, eggs, and coffee," came the quick reply. "Look closer, baby, touch them." The potatoes, once firm and strong, had gone soft under pressure. The eggs, fragile on the outside but liquid within, had hardened completely. But the coffee, oh, that coffee filled the air with something beautiful. It had changed the water itself. Each one faced with the similar boiling water, the mother explained. But look at how differently they responded. The potato went in strong but came out weak. The egg went in fragile but came out hard and bitter. But the coffee bean didn't just survive the heat, it transformed the very water that threatened to destroy it. So here's what I know. We all face boiling water, but the question is whether adversity will come. It will. The question is, which one are you? Are you the potato that looks strong and then goes soft when pressure mounts? Are you the egg that starts with a tender heart but hardens after life hits you with loss, disappointment, and pain? Your outside may look the same, but your inside has grown tough, bitter, unmovable, and unwilling to see others' perspectives. Or are you like the coffee bean? The bean doesn't just endure the heat, but changes the very circumstances that brought the pain. When things are at their worst, you don't just survive, you transform the situation around you. You make it better. You make it something beautiful. Because here's the truth that the coffee bean teaches us. What you do, big or small, has the power to change your surroundings for the better. You don't have to be the biggest voice in the room. You don't have to be the one with the most degrees or the fanciest title. You just have to be willing to transform the water you're in. So as we continue this conference, I want you to feel the bird in your hands. That's your power. Your research, your writing, your voice in faculty meetings, your presence in spaces where decisions get made, and your willingness to speak when silence feels safer. I think about my grandparents and what they endured so I could stand here today. I think about my daughters learning about Rosa Parks but not Claudette Colvin, the 15-year-old who refused to give up her seat 9 months before Rosa did. Community made that whole movement possible. And I think about my ancestors that I'll never know, those who choose life and sometimes chose death so others could live. And I think about the world my girls will inherit. I cannot change it alone. None of us can. We have to lean into community. So I leave you with the wise woman's words. The answer, my friend, is in your hands. The answer is in your hands. Thank you.
Engage with the next 2 days. Our next session starts at 10 o'clock. So please take a moment to get a coffee, get invigorated more than you already are, and we'll see you in the next sessions at 10 o'clock. Thank you all.